Welcome, my name is Dan Vikas and this is the Common Good Show, a program that celebrates a fundamental truth. Life is a beautiful gift full of blessings and trials, learning experiences, and opportunities to grow. This is a show that celebrates the little yet profound experiences in our lives that add value, improve our outlook, and encourage us to appreciate everyday blessings from God. These are the conversations that contribute to and highlight the common good as told through the experiences and words of our special guests. All of our guests share an unwavering commitment to their faith and the acceptance that they are at their very best when God is put first in their lives. What is the common good, you might ask? Simply stated, it is the sum total of social conditions that allow people, either as groups or an individual, to reach their fulfillment in its entirety. This morning, I have Tyler Rosser with me, coach of the Ave Maria women's varsity, head soccer team. I guess it's not varsity at this point, but yeah, welcome. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
I appreciate you coming out and getting this together, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So I'll just start it off just with our big question. What's one little thing in your daily life that acts as a constant reminder of you of God's blessings and His faithfulness?
Absolutely. So I think the one thing, I started it when I was in Focus. I was a Focus missionary for 4 years, and one of the things in Focus that they do is daily holy hour, daily mass, and a daily rosary. And to be honest, when I left Focus, I kind of had to, in essence, in a way, own my prayer life again, because it was so set out for us in Focus. And I learned pretty quickly that holy hour was a necessity for me. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, driving, whatever, but I just learned that holy hour has to come paramount. And so during the week especially, I'll do my best to do the holy hour and daily mass and a rosary, but the key foundational thing for me is definitely that mental prayer, that examine that I do in that holy hour. How did you, moving out of Focus, how did you kind of readapt to just, normal everyday life and then make that decision no, I need this full hour, not just... Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I'm so grateful for the habit that it was instilled in Focus. And so after we left Focus in 2015, I became a teacher at a Catholic high school in Montgomery, Alabama, where I'm from. And even though I wasn't a full-time missionary anymore, I was still a missionary, right, with the high school students, and I realized that apart from him, we can do nothing, right? So honestly, it did start off with me kind of having some quiet time on the way to school in the morning, and that's enough, right? In God's eyes, He's pleased with whatever we give Him. But I learned really quickly that I just needed that time with Jesus, and so. A week into school starting, I just went back to it, and
I need that.
I need that. And it was a real blessing. And I think going back to the blessings that you asked, I think the first thing I do start off with a little bit of praise in that time, but then in my examine that I do, just recalling the previous day or that morning and just recounting those blessings. And it could be my family or something that happened the previous day, but it always kind of gets everything off on the right track, because I've realized that a lot of times we can, and I speak from personal experience, I'll focus on maybe that one or two negative things that happened that day. When you go back in the morning and say, actually, there are countless blessings. I had a cold sip of water last night after a hot game, I was like, oh my gosh, what a blessing, and so just thanking God for a couple things really kind of sets the day from a perspective of gratitude and abundance instead of scarcity and negativity. So.
Well, and I really like how you mentioned something as simple as a glass of water, because a lot of times I think we can find ourselves, and I found myself actually last night. I was writing down, I do a couple of different things at night in my journal, and I'm still trying to figure out what morning routine and evening routine works best for me. But I was writing down some stuff, and I was like, man, yesterday morning I got the great chance to sit down with one of the high school kids from my youth group. We met up before school, and by the end of the day, I had completely forgotten about it, because all this sort of stuff happened throughout the day, and I was sitting there and I was like, shoot. That was so good this morning, and that was still today. Wow, and it's so easy just with how life goes and things happening every day, just to forget about those little moments.
For sure, absolutely. It kind of goes. Tell me about the journaling thing, because I know that's a really fruitful thing too. So how long have you been doing that?
On and off, probably. So on and off in terms of different structures.
Yeah.
I've been like on it for maybe coming up on like 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. And before that, and again, still kind of refining it. Before that, I was very intentional about spending time with God. The career that I had at the time, like right out of college, it really allowed me, and pretty much my senior year of college and then going out of it, it really allowed me a good chunk of time in the morning where I'd get up, I'd go to the gym. My first thing was just to get my body moving.
Yeah.
My mind can wake up later. There are many mornings when I was like at the gym, like half asleep. But by the time I got home, I usually, if I timed it right, I'd have about an hour and so I'd like clean up, eat, whatnot. But then this was just like my favorite thing in the morning. I'd love to just sit there I'd make some tea or some coffee and just sit on the balcony outside. It was like screened in. And just sit there, and sometimes in silence, sometimes with some worship music or just any music at all, and just but something like uplifting, something good, and just like really spend that time with God. And then as you know, life got busy and things went on, I found like, oh no, I really have to be intentional about setting aside time to write stuff down. And there was enough happening. It's one of those things like, I don't know where this came from, but I remember it from like back in middle school. It was like the story that you tell yourself has a tendency to change over time because there's certain details you remember clearly, and so it's nothing cynical, but over time you remember only specific details, and so they get exaggerated or focused on. And so I was like, man, I'm realizing there was a lot of self-growth and a lot of things happening, and I was like, I want to remember all this, but remember it right, not just my version of it. So that was really the catalyst for starting to write stuff down. And very scattered at first. It was just like when I felt like it, and then it became like, okay, I should do something every night, and then gratitude, and it went to like maybe just mornings, maybe mornings and nights, and I'm at a spot where it's a little bit in the morning, more at night, and the one in the morning is really just kind of setting the tone for, you know, what's my purpose? Which I think sitting down every morning and being like, what's my actual purpose for today?
That's so good.
is a good challenge, because there's the obvious answers of work, like what do you have to do, but then the more meta stuff of like, you know, okay, in some sense my purpose is driving to work in a good manner, like if something happens I could cut off, just not, you know, nothing. So a little bit in the morning, and then at night like a good reflection of the day and the gratitude. And I do a little bit of gratitude in the morning and evening, but honestly, I find that like, and this is like literally was thinking about that this morning. I find that just doing a longer chunk at the end of the day is better for me.
Definitely.
Because in the morning I've got are you doing the Bible in a Year podcast?
Yes.
So in the morning I'll do that. And I find that works actually a little bit better than writing stuff, than perhaps writing everything down.
Absolutely.
Because it just gets like I'm actually doing something, and gets my mind like rolling, like doing like actual daily stuff. So figuring it out, but right now it's a little bit in the morning, and then journaling a lot more like at the end of the day.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think journaling also, especially if you're dealing with struggles or anxieties or fears, like just bringing them to the light is so powerful. So it's a great habit.
It was, absolutely. And it was funny the other day. So there's actually something that I've been like just thinking about for going on like 2.5 years now, and never really had a clear answer for it. And like sometimes really struggled with it and been really frustrated, like not to the point where I'm like actually mad, but just like, man, like why can't, like really nothing yet? And end of last week, I was journaling about something completely different. And then it made me think, and I was like, oh shoot, what kind of this? And then all of a sudden, like a page and a half later, was basically like the Spirit talking in my ear of like 2.5 years of trying to figure something out. Just boop.
There it is.
What's God?
God's timing.
All right. Right. His timing exactly. It's not. It's usually a longer wait than we would anticipate, but.
Absolutely. That's wonderful, though.
It was.
Glad you got some clarity.
Yeah, me as well. Because honestly, I was just like, I was waiting on it. But I think it's one of those things where, at least for me, it was a reminder that God's like, hey, I got this.
Yes.
Don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
I'll do it on my time. I'll make sure it works. You can just relax.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this quote by Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, and he said it. I think when he became like this first address. And he said that the world is destroyed by the impatience of man, but it's saved by the patience of God. And that's really stuck with me since I heard it probably a couple months ago, just how impatient I am with others or with God's will, like why not God now? But also recalling the fact that, you know, he's been so patient with me, right? And I look back at when I was in college and boy, I was different. Let's just say that. I was different than how I am now, but he was so patient and he met me where I was at. And had he given me all this growth in that one instance, I probably couldn't have taken it. But there was this gradual, and he was so patient, and it's really helped me with my kids and then the team as well, just to be patient with them and meeting them where they're at, and recognizing his timing, although it's hard and there's some wrestling there, his timing is best. So, yeah.
How do you, because as a coach, you're in a unique position where it's, like you just said, it's not just yourself.
Yeah.
You've got 22,
52.
24?
Yeah, we have a first team and a second team. It's one team with two groups, and so we...
So a lot more.
Yeah, a lot of them.
So you have 52 other individuals who are also, you know, not just as players developing, but as people throughout the season. Is there a particular, in the sense of being the coach, is there a particular challenge that, you know, as you've grown into the role, it was something that when you first faced it, you were like, this is like, I'm going to be the enemy. I can't figure this out.
Yeah.
But kind of looking back on it, you're like, oh no, I needed this for whatever reason. And
Oh, absolutely. And I think coming here in 2017, we didn't win a game that first year. And it was very challenging for me because I came in with a lot of excitement, and through no one's fault, it just the results didn't go as I thought they would. And I took it very hard. And I think, yeah, I did. And I don't think I responded very, very well. And what I did to, in essence, fix it, quote unquote, was instead of surrendering more, I started to control more for those first couple seasons. And I had this beautiful, quote, you know, culture document that I wrote out. And it was 14 pages, and it was all these expectations, and it was just a reaction to the season. And it was sort of me trying to impose my will instead of looking up and saying, Lord, what's your will for this team and this group of ladies? And through a lot of reflection and a lot of healing, the Lord kind of gently revealed to me that, you know, as wonderful as that document was, this wasn't really his plan, right? And so through prayer and some spiritual direction and some mentorship, I just recognized that this isn't my program, it's the Lord's program. I'm a steward of the program. 2 days ago, the daily gospel reading was, you know, about the wise and faithful servant who gives the other servants, and the wise and faithful steward who gives his servants their food at the proper time, right? And so what's my role? My role is to steward God's program and to give the women what they need in that specific time. So that may be helping them with their first touch, or it may be sitting down with them with their academics, or it may simply be just listening to them, whatever it is. And so just that concept of it's not my program, it's his, being a good steward and giving the women what they need. And it's not so much about the wins and losses, because what the women need after a loss may be different from what they need after a win. You can't control the wins sometimes, you can't control the losses, but just meeting them where they're at, being present with them, has really kind of honed my own personal vision for coaching. So, yeah.
What do you, in that transition of kind of going from, you know, this is what I like, that initial gut reaction to where you're at now, is there some either part of the progress or some aspect of it that you're most proud of, or you're like, man, I'm glad?
Most proud of? Well, I think first and foremost, right, all the good comes from God, right? And I think that, that's a really good question, Dan. I've never thought of that. I think it's a paradox, because in the spiritual life, right, when you seek to control, you'd think it would go well because you think you have everything all in a nice, that doesn't go well, right? But when you surrender, like, the Lord's in control. And so what was really beautiful is I really started to reflect in December 2019, January 2020 of what I had done the past 3 years and trying to control, and it just didn't go well. And it was amazing to see, right when I surrendered, like, the Lord took over, and last season, 2020 season was so beautiful, you know, like with the results. But I think it wasn't so much the results as much as it was a fruit of me responding better to His grace, me loving the women better, them receiving that love better, the culture becoming better, and then everything else fell into place.
Right.
Because if I know I'm enough in God's eyes, and I know the women are enough in God's eyes, and we create a culture that says, you're enough, I'm enough, let's do this together, and everything else is going to take care of itself. And it was a beautiful season, and this season so far has been a beautiful season. We're coming off a couple tough results the last couple games, but overall the culture is just so much more beautiful. The women are incredible. I'm very grateful to coach them. So I just think responding to His grace, I'm so proud of the women too. It's just a great group. So, yeah.
Was there a moment of... Now it's not like you went out and committed some big crime, so it's
right.
a little different. But was there a moment of realizing you had to forgive yourself for the initial reaction versus actually being able to because I know the process of surrendering is not something, at least in my own life,
right.
it doesn't happen like
right.
that.
Right.
But was there a point where you're like, man, I know I need to, it was nothing like I was trying to do it right and it was good intention and this and that, but a moment when you're like, I forgive myself for the mistakes I've made and I am enough.
Well, I think that there was this crucial meeting with my supervisor in December of 2019. And I was so grateful for that meeting because he was very honest with me, and he said, here's some areas that I see you need to grow. And I think there's that difference between niceness, being nice and being kind, right? Being nice could have told me what I wanted to hear. But even though it was hard to hear, some of the areas I needed to grow with, it was so kind, right? Just pinpointing those areas for my own personal growth. And I was so grateful for that. And it was that was like a light switch for me. And so it was looking back and those years, 2017, those seasons, 2017 through 2019, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so I thought I was doing well. I thought I was doing my best until some things were brought to the light. And I was like, man, I really wasn't. And so I think number one, right, going to the Lord and saying, Lord, I'm sorry. And He's just so patient, right? So like Saint Therese, I'm a huge fan of Saint Therese, right? Just like every time you fail, just running into His arms, right? And He just embraces you. And so I just received a lot of consolation after that conversation, which was really, really wonderful. And then you're right, just saying, you know what, I didn't know what I didn't know. And there was a lot of wounds there from my past that I was reacting to too. So forgiving myself and then asking the women to forgive me too. And we had a meeting in January of 2020 where I just said, ladies, here's what I did. I'm sorry. Let's move forward together. And it was a gradual process. There was a lot of healing that needed to take place. But I was really grateful for that meeting. And I think I will always look back at that as a big turning point in my career and in my family life too. So, yeah.
Would you be willing to share one or two of those points in the meeting that that you're like, ooh, I need to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me think back to that.
And while you're kind of thinking on it too, I like how you just mentioned that it wasn't just when you had that conversation and that reaction, it wasn't just then in that moment that you were like, oh, this happened and I'm doing this. You're like, oh, all these other things from the past started to rear their ugly head, so to speak.
Oh, big time.
And you're like, I didn't know that had any impact on it. But cause I've seen that in myself in a lot of different circumstances when I'm trying to move on and whatnot.
Absolutely.
That's a real part.
It is a real part. And I think that's why I think, so that spiritual direction and that mentorship that I received was really important, because one can be praying every day and going to Mass, but there are these really deep-seated things that we have that sometimes you just need a little bit of help unearthing them.
We can't dig those up.
And it's like a scalpel, the Lord just going in with a scalpel. And so I was really grateful for someone else sort of shining that light into those places, because I was reacting to things that were really deep, and I could have fixed them from kind of like a pharisaical perspective, right? Like externally I'm doing all these right things, but until it comes from this internal healing from the heart, uprooting of those things, I think we always have the tendency to go back to those things until they're unearthed. So I was really grateful for someone else shining the light. But going back to that question, I think that I think that part of that culture that I was creating, right? Like imposing my will on them, it had, a lot of it wasn't even soccer related. It was a lot about like their own personal behavior off the field. And what I was thinking in essence was like, well, my team should never do this. My team should never underage drink. My team should never do this. And I wasn't thinking, but it was like that deep rooted thing. Like that's what I was actually doing, is being prideful and saying, well, my team should never do this because I want my team, the culture that I create, to be good. And if anyone does anything that's going to harm the culture that I've created, that my own will, then they're in trouble, right? And so I think just listening, you know, one of the things he said was like, step back, all right? Take some time to really reflect on what's important, what's not, and really like recognize they're human, they're young, you're human, and like just let go of some of that stuff. And yeah, I mean, of course I don't want the team to go out and do crazy things. At the same time, like, why are they doing them? And I think that's the most important part. And how can I be there for them as they walk through these very tough college years, as opposed to my team should never do this, and if you do it, you're in trouble, and that's it, right? But college, especially now, and both of us are not too far removed from it, right? But even now, you were talking about identity issues before we went on the air, right? And all the things that we receive, but especially them, like social media, what society's telling them they are, and all this stuff, and sometimes they react to that in maybe a negative way, but do they need someone who's going to come in with a iron fist, or do they need someone who's going to be there and walk with them through this difficult time and be present to them? I think being present to them and just being there is most of the time just enough. So I think that's one of the things in that meeting that he kind of really helped me reflect on.
And you're speaking, I'm actually, at the moment, I'm coaching a high school soccer team.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so you're speaking my language in terms of knowing the players. And that's actually one thing that now, I was not a popular kid in high school, like not invited to all the parties and that sort of thing. So maybe I just didn't know they were happening. But between youth group and the coaching now, seeing like every single weekend, these kids are going out and doing something. And there was the tendency to, last year we had I coached them last year as well. We had a great group of kids, but wild. Which was great. It was fun. It was entertaining. A lot of learning. And then coming into this season, I approached it very differently because I think I'd learned from the youth group where a lot of the kids, you know, there's one or two of the kids that are like really into their Bible now and like getting into it, and they're hitting that wall of frustration where like, kind of like what you said, you're trying to impose your will, and it's not because you're like you need to do it my way. It's like, no, you've and forgive me, like call me out if I'm speaking out of place, but I'm like, from my own experience and whatnot, and from how you said it, it's from a place of like, I realized what I did that wasn't right, and if I had only done it this way, and so that's what like you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. And so like leading up to this season for the gents, I did a one-page player contract and agreement, and really simple. And there was that temptation to be like, these are all the things, but I was like, that ain't gonna work. So I was like, no cussing on the field, because we represent our school and each other. We respect the other team, and then just being on time and having all your equipment was the gist of it. I'm like, three simple things. And those are gonna be ruled with an iron fist. But the rest of it, like I had a great conversation with one of the players after our tryouts finished yesterday, and it was about like some other stuff and his family, and you know, he was always like right on time, and it was a good personal conversation with kind of what you're saying, attending to what they need outside of that, and then letting it be, so to speak.
Absolutely, that's the thing. Just planting the seed. And it sounds to me, yes, those things are important because they sort of relate to on the field performance. And at the same time, right? Everything else, you want to be able to be approachable, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're ruling things with an iron fist, and there's going to be the fear there. But if someone's struggling with something off the field and they just need someone to listen or talk to, it seems to me that they'd be able to come talk to you. Because,
I hope so.
Yeah,
I try.
Because there's that level of trust, and there's not that judgment, so to speak. It's just the meeting them where they're at. And there's that phrase like, meet them where they're at, and don't let them stay there. But I have kind of recognized in my own life, like, I'm going to meet them where they're at, and I'm going to let Jesus do the rest.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to be present to them and walk with them, and Jesus, because I can't change their hearts.
Yeah.
It's only Him who can. And so surrendering them to Him has been amazing.
Which is true in every part of life.
Oh,
of
yeah.
every person.
Yep.
And I think that took me a while to figure out too, because there were certain instances like with personal relationships, with my family, this or that or whatnot. It's very easy to think differently. Like, okay, as a coach, this; as a family, this; as boyfriend, girlfriend, this. Yep. And it's like, no, it's the same. Like I'm not going to change any one
exactly.
of their hearts. Like,
Kids,
I really got to just.
Yeah.
How was that translated into your family?
Absolutely.
And with the kids, because you got little. 7 is still.
Oh
little,
yeah.
But.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that I was talking to one of our players about this several weeks ago, and I said, because
just for context for everyone listening and watching, how many kids do you have?
Okay. Yep. So my wife's So my wife's name is Danae. We've been married for 11 years, and then we have.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. We have James, who's 7. He's in the 2nd grade. Johnny's 5 in kindergarten, and Danae teaches kindergarten, so she's teaching
nice.
him, which is cool. Gemma is about to turn 3, and Josie's about to turn 1. So very lively at home, especially with Danae being a kindergarten teacher, being around 5 and 6-year-olds all day, and then being a soccer coach when in season it's so crazy, and so we come home, it's like, doesn't get any, it's like,
just keeps going.
It's more crazy. But I think that one of the big things that's honestly recently happened with me is just that word enough, that the Holy Spirit just putting on my heart, that and a real consolation and grace to recognize that I am enough. And what I do is enough. What I mean by that is, without God, I'm not enough, right? But with His grace, I am enough, and then some. And then what I do is enough. And I think about the multiplications of the loaves and the fish, right? Like, they didn't think they had enough, but then Jesus did the rest, right? And so what I do is enough. And so reflecting on that and looking at my kids and saying, they're enough too, right? Yeah. They're made in the image and likeness of God. They are good. They are enough. And my role as a parent is to steward them, because ultimately they belong to God. And it's all about growth, right? And so when I say we're enough, when you think about like the parable of the mustard seed, right? In that moment, the mustard seed in and of itself is enough, because it can't be anything besides the mustard seed. At the same time, it's called to grow. And then it becomes this huge, beautiful tree, but it's going to be through daily incremental growth. And so I am enough because I can't be anything other than where I am right now. Yeah. And at the same time, the Lord has invited me to grow, but it's going to be daily, slow, incremental growth. And it's the same thing with the kids, right? Like, you are enough in God's eyes. You're doing enough. And at the same time, we're still called to grow each day. And then there's that level of patience there with them too. But just that reflection on that they're enough, I'm enough, it just really changes everything, because they're not lacking in anything, right? No. They're good in and of themselves. And they're ends in of themselves too, right? And reflecting on that, like in terms of the players too, I think a lot of times in sports, coaches can use their players to win games, right? And they're only good if they are beneficial towards success. But when you treat the game, when you treat the women and the kids as ends in of themselves, then it's like a whole new perspective. Right. You're there to help them grow, but you can't use them to win games, you know? Right. Culture of use versus just a culture of goodness.
Yeah. So, How do you walk the line between enough and then nurturing growth?
Yeah, I think it's a great question.
Either with the players or with your family.
I think that Galatians, chapter 5, 23, The fruits of the Spirit?
You're calling out my Bible knowledge because
Me neither. It's like,
I'm saying I couldn't help you there.
But helping, like when you're reflecting on my own personal growth, treating myself with the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And so when you're disciplining the kids, it's for their growth, and I mean, don't get me wrong, this is not I struggle with impatience with them. Sometimes they drive me crazy, but when I approach it, sometimes I don't, but when I approach it from a spirit of gentleness, it goes better, obviously, but you're just saying, here's where you're at, here's where you need to be, I love you, let's walk together in it, as opposed to, just do it, eat your broccoli now, or whatever it is, right? And so I think walking the line, I think the fruits of the Spirit are kind of a good accountability, a piece of accountability. Is like, am I approaching this from that perspective, or am I approaching it from a perspective of anger or pride or control, stuff like that?
So almost as in the self-reflection is kind of your compass in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can be like, you can be like, all right, in this moment, what am I feeling and how am I acting? And that kind of gives you that.
Like, I'll tell you a story this morning. So James, we were talking about this before the show, James is choleric. And so as a 7-year-old, kind of wanting his way all the time and very, sometimes maybe a little bit hard to hone, right? And kind of give him that compass. So this morning, he says, Dad, can I watch the golf tournament online after, he loves golf. Can I come home and watch the golf tournament online? He said, sure, buddy. And I said, what golf tournament is on this weekend? And I usually tell him. I don't remember a time where I've ever asked him that question. And so he says, is it my duty to tell you every weekend what golf tournament is on? And I was like, what did you just say?
Hold on.
Yes. And so but then and I think honestly, 3 months ago, or even 2 months ago, I would have just been like, James, go, and lost it, right? But just like, okay, gentleness. So I said, what did you, I've never asked you that before. Can you see in your tone how that could be inferred as inappropriate? And just walking him through it like that. But I'll tell you in that moment, I was like, yes. It was like, holy moly. So I still don't know what golf tournament's on this weekend. I didn't look it up. He didn't tell me. So it's all good.
That's fruitful.
Yeah, nice.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I guess it's one of those things where I think I'm learning this. And some people might figure this out in middle school. Some people might never figure it out. But I'm definitely somewhere along the lines. It never stops.
Yes.
You're not going to get to a place where you're like, I figured out the fruits of the Spirit
exactly.
for me. I'm not patient and I am not this. It's like, no, every day there's going to be more.
100%.
And it's just going to be, if it's not, that's the thing. With, to spin in the society today and whatnot, with instant gratification and with getting things and this and that, it's so easy to think, once I get work figured out, life's gonna be good. Especially I'm at the age where all my friends are getting married and having kids, and so there's that temptation of once I get that relationship, it'll be good. No, not the case. And it's like, once I get here, it'll be good. It's just, that's not how it is.
Ever.
It's always, and which ties back into you are enough as you are, because that's all you can be.
Absolutely.
And it's like, no, you're going to be challenged every single day with what's on your plate. And it's never going to stop. And that's not a bad thing. That means we have the opportunity to grow every day. But I think it's I don't know what the technical term would be, but kind of living in the reality of, I'm not trying to get to this point and then it's good, or I'm not trying to get here and here and here. Right. It's like, no, every single day is a constant, just maybe a couple steps back, hopefully a couple more forward.
Absolutely.
And it's just the ebb and flow and the continual growth. But I'm honestly finally at that point where I think I naturally, subconsciously, I was there through my, probably, from little kid all the way up through my first 2 years of college. Then you actually get hit with some challenges in life, some real, and I know people I'm not, waving a flag or anything. I had a very easy life.
Right. Right.
Like I had a great home. Mom and dad are fantastic. Like I went to good schools. Was able to travel. I faced no real hardship whatsoever. So I know, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that people face challenges much earlier than that, and at all different stages. But it took that for me to be like autopilot to turn off and realize, no, I actually have to work at this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, this is a daily commitment.
It is. Yep. Doesn't stop, like you said.
No.
So,
is there a certain prayer for you, or prayer or song, that helps you just brings you back? Like in a moment or in a situation where it just kind of recenters you, refocuses you, be like, oh, you know what? Like it just connects you back with God.
Oh, absolutely. I think the easiest prayer is simply the name of Jesus, calling to mind his presence. There's power in that. I like the surrender novena. Have you heard of the surrender novena? So it ends every day with 10 times saying, oh Jesus, I surrender myself to you, take care of everything. So that's a big one.
Okay.
And then I really like the Come Holy Spirit prayer, the whole thing. And my spiritual director several years back when I was teaching, because I was, classroom manager, it's not my thing. I was like, but praying that before class just helped me recognize that, okay, praying that the Spirit's present and he can move in this classroom, even if it seems like chaotic, like the Spirit's still present. And so just to trust that the Holy Spirit's present. And so we pray that prayer before training, before games, just to trust that the Holy Spirit's going to guide our training session, guide the games, etc. Those are a couple. How about you?
Yeah, honestly, it's a bit of a longer form. I'll give two answers. I've never, ever been in any sort of situation, moment, whether it's just instant or weeks long or years long, where the rosary hasn't completely just... It's wild. It can be in the worst, and I just you know what? I can say it, and for the beginning of it is still feeling everything that I was feeling first. And then just somehow, by the end of it, every single time, without fail, I'm just like,
it just
restored,
peace,
centered. It's it's that peace that goes beyond all understanding.
Oh yeah.
And it's every single time it still blows my mind.
Oh yeah.
And then a shorter one is actually, there's a wonderful little old lady named Josephine, and God bless her, but she appears to have every physical ailment you could possibly imagine, and so the woman's she's wonderful, but she's always in pain or something. So it's an interesting. It's one of those things where she's a very special little old lady, and very kind, very sweet. And she told me one time. She also keeps telling me she's like, she has two sons, and one's a priest and one's not, and she keeps telling me to pray to Saint Joseph to be a priest. And we've had conversations about it, and I told her there was a point in my life when I really discerned it and was like, is this? I've always thought, I've always really felt called to the family life, and but I was like, you know what, this is what God, you're gonna do your thing. So so that aside, she always teases me about that. She's like, pray to Saint Joseph. But one thing she was, I don't know what brought it up, but she's like, most sacred heart of Jesus, make my heart like yours.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And she's like, just repeat that, just say that. And there's been, that one I use, it's shorter, but I use it less than the rosary.
Right.
Because it's almost like, have you ever played Mario Kart?
Yeah.
It's like the star in Mario Kart.
That's awesome.
Where it's you don't get it all the time. It's not the common one, but when you use it, it works. And so there's been a couple different times when it's one of those things I just focus, in order to block, if I'm in something where I just need to just unplug and just stop listening, I'll just say that on repeat until...
That's awesome. Yeah.
Until I'm thinking about something else or I moved on or whatever. But the rosary for sure, I love the rosary so much. And then that one, most sacred heart of Jesus, make my heart like yours. And it also works as a reminder for me, what are you really focused on? In that moment, I'm like, because it's easy to be like, all right, God, I want a heart like yours.
Right.
Okay, but what does that mean?
Yes.
Make my heart like yours, and what is that? And it's like, okay, would I really be concerned about what's consuming my mind and my thoughts and my energy right now? It's like, probably not.
No, he thinks differently than we do.
I love that as well. And it's funny you said that, because in that constant realization that this is a work in progress, and it will be forever, at least for me, realizing that I love the fear of the Lord begins with wisdom, or wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. And it's like, as we grow and we start to develop and get a little, like, we get better, we can discern things quicker and figure stuff out. And so it's realizing, like, oh yeah, like I can, there's moments where I've caught myself like, oh, I know, like I'm better than I was before, and I realize I'm making these better decisions. But then I'll get hung up on something and be like, man, like I thought I was better before. And like I thought I saw where this was going. And it's like, hey, the little mustard seed, you're growing. But God still is on a completely different
different wavelength.
Yeah. It's not.
And that's an understatement.
It's like, so don't be frustrated, because you are growing. But at the same time, as good as at discerning or as wise as you're gonna get, He's still thinking about stuff that you couldn't even begin to comprehend.
Exactly.
So don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think over the past couple games, really, that's come to mind, because 3 weeks ago, less than a month ago, we played the number 5 team in the country. We beat them, which was amazing. And then we beat another tough conference opponent, and now we've lost 4 games in a row. And so there's like this. So I thought, right, like surrender to divine providence, right? Like there's that sense of, Lord, whatever happens, I'm with you. I surrender myself to you. And over the last 4 games, we've had a couple key injuries and things like that. And there's been some serious wrestling, right? Because like, we're putting you first, Lord. Like, can't you glorify your name through some wins? Because it's like, and I feel like right now for the team, it's like an uphill battle in terms of the results. But our assistant coach, Talia Meza, this morning, in fact, she said this. She was reflecting, one of her penance after confession was reflecting on, I'm the vine, you are the branches, and he prunes us, right? That pruning, right? And so apart from him, we can do nothing, and we're growing because of him. But there's going to be pruning, and there's going to be suffering, and it's for the good, and we can trust that. But it's going to hurt. But it's also beautiful and for your good. And so just reflecting on that for the team, like she just said, I think right now we're being pruned, and we can either fight against it, or we can just like accept it and receive it and trust that he has a bigger plan in mind, which was so reassuring, because just because you're putting him first, you know, there's these movies out there like Facing the Giants and these books. It's like you put God first, and then these miracles will start happening, right? Those are all fiction. And I'm sure God does work miracles, but there's also the suffering too, and it's a both and it's all for His glory and all to get us to heaven, really. Like, and so I'm really glad you reflected on that, because I thought, you know, all right, I can handle everything, but in prayer the last couple of weeks, it's been like, Lord, like, what are you doing? This is really hard. And I think it's okay to wrestle with Him, right? Because you feel the way you feel. Those are human emotions. At the end of the day, like, that's surrender. Like, but I still trust you.
Yeah.
I still trust you. Yeah.
I love her, I don't know what the word would be, but her thought of, you know, we're being pruned, and we can either let it work in our hearts, or we can fight against it. Because I think it's one of those things where, and even in movies like Facing the Giants and whatnot, the coach, you know, the whole story is about the football team, but the reality is, you know, he and a big part of that was, you know, they've struggled financially, and then they were trying to have a family.
Exactly,
and
infertility,
And, you know, it's very easy to overlook it in the film, because you're focused on the highs and the emotions and the dopamine of like, oh, this is happening in the football team and this. But if like, I think you can make it, this is an interesting concept just in my head, but you can make it a movie about one day of someone's life. Like a full production, because the emotional range of one day of him going to football and things being great, and then, you know, getting to that state championship, but then going home and still not having the battle between the two.
So much.
Because, it's like, okay, there are going to be those wins, those things that when you surrender, but I think you can go all the way, bring it full circle back to the journaling. We can forget about it. We can forget about the good things because of all this other stuff happening.
That's so
then
true.
It's just and then we go from the pruning actually helping us to grow and refine to to really fighting against it.
Absolutely. That's the truth. So
That hits. Yeah, that's very true.
get you. So
Has there been any mentors in your life that have been like really instrumental? And you talk about your spiritual director a bunch. So maybe him or her, and as well as someone else, but really been instrumental in the past couple of years for you, or earlier than that, and kind of directing you.
Absolutely. I think that I really did have wonderful parents. So first and foremost, my mom is a cradle Catholic, and she's praying rosaries after rosary. And I fell away in college, but she's like my Saint Monica. She really prayed me back into the church. My dad.
Thank the Lord for moms, for good moms and dads, but
both and. My dad, really good leader, so just watching him, he was an executive in a television company, and so really just watching his leadership and how he treated people fairly and justly was really beautiful. And obviously, so my parents. My spiritual director was very helpful when I was in Focus. He was in Dubuque, Iowa. And then when we left Dubuque, Iowa, because we were stationed at Loras College, we actually kept going on Skype for a couple years. That was very fruitful. And then recently, if you don't mind me sharing, I've been actually, there's this mentorship program through Catholic Psych Institute, and it's out of New York. And if you actually call it like counseling or therapy, you can't do it because it's interstate boundary laws and stuff. But if you call it mentorship, you can actually do it. And it's through an app called Voxer. I'm sure you've heard of it. I had never heard of it, but I'm sure most people have.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah. And so you talk for 15 minutes, and she's I forget, she's a licensed therapist. She's a doctor. So you talk for 15 minutes about whatever you want to talk about into Voxer, and then either that day or the next day she'll respond. And it's just this daily conversation going back and forth. And that's one of the things that's borne a lot of fruit in my life in terms of having someone else shine a light in some of those areas. Like you're in a cave and then someone else has a different perspective and kind of uproots it. And so the last half year, going through that with her has been extraordinarily healing, and for something that I think I will always be grateful for. So I think my parents, spiritual director, different leaders in Focus were wonderful. My wife is the holiest, most beautiful woman I know. She reminds me of Mary. Not that I ever knew her personally, but what I gathered Mary would be like. So she's my best friend and such a gift to me. The best gift God's ever given me is her and those crazy kiddos. The Sons of Thunder, James and John. And if you ever imagine what they would be like, it's James.
You got the two.
So yeah, I would say so.
Was that a real inspiration behind the names for the two kids?
My dad's name is James.
Okay.
So we wanted to do the namesake. And then St. John Neumann was actually really pivotal, because we struggled with infertility for about 4 years. And we were at a Focus interview weekend in Philadelphia, and so my wife went to his shrine and prayed that we would conceive, and 2 weeks later we conceived. So St. John Neumann was a big one, and so we thought James and Sons of Thunder. And now it just we spoke them into existence, and they're Sons of Thunder.
So when the golf tournament's on and it's going like crazy, that is what it is.
That is what it is. Yep.
That's wild. Well, that honestly, I wish we could keep talking forever.
Oh, of course, me too,
But
Dan.
that wraps us up with our time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing that with me and sharing a bit about your story and all that sort of stuff. And we'll continue to stay in touch because I'd love to hear more and talk to you more about it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and thank you so much, guys, for joining us for this episode of the Common Good Show, brought to you guys by Guadalupe Roastery in partnership with Maria Vision. We'll see you next time.